Okay, so welcome aboard and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at some more settings. Most of them we're just going to have a cursory look at, but concentrate on the ones that we'll be using and needing for the future. So the settings can be found at the top of the screen by taking your cursor up, and you get a drop down box appear. And the first one is File. The bottom one is useful for when you want to finish the game. You can save a flight and load a flight. This could be useful if you want to set up a situation like an approach, and you want to start the game on the approach and keep practicing it until you get it correct. Then this will be quite useful. So you just click on Save a Flight. And it's a situation you want rather than the replay, which would be like a movie of what you've been doing. A situation sets you up for a particular point in time and space, and then you can save that and save it, and then if you want to load it again, come to situations and you'll find a list of the ones that you've saved, and you can click on those and it'll start. I think there's an option if you go back to the save. Yeah, you can actually click on that box, and so whenever you start the game up, it'll start up in that situation. So again, that's quite useful for training. Take screenshots, toggle video recording. Again, you can record your flights and look back at them, so that could be quite useful. There's a logbook that's automatically stored of your flights, and so again that might be something you would want to do. And so you close these boxes by clicking on the little red circle in the corner. Checklists, we're going to use the Zibo mod, and so we have a checklist, as you can see, on our electronic flight bag, our EFB here, which we'll be using. So as an example, and we can click those off. So that's the checklist we'll be using, but there is the option up there of loading other checklists if you want to, and opening text files. I think you can create a text file and open it on the screen for you to read if you want to. Flight configuration, I think we've had a look at that. So the only thing we didn't cover is the AI aircraft. That's the other aircraft that you see in the scene. By default it sets up 3, but you can add more if you want to by clicking that box there, and you can edit the type of aircraft by choosing from this list here. Obviously the more AI aircraft you have, the more pressure it's going to put on your graphics, so that's a matter of choice, and obviously depending on your particular system. So we can do that, and we go back. Weight and balance is something I'm going to be doing a video on, and we won't be using this. We'll be using the again the electronic flight bag on Zibo mod. As you can see, it's got its own weight and fuel balance here, and that's the one we'll be using. But also I'm going to do a whole video on that because I think it's important to understand weight and balance. Failures, this is something we'll probably be using. I think this might be useful for, we want to understand the systems of the aircraft, and once we do, I think we can set up some failures. Then that would be a good way of practicing the procedures, and also our understanding, making sure that we understand our systems correctly. so we can take the correct actions. So to clear all failures, just click on Fix All Systems, and say we want to set up an engine failure or engine fire on takeoff. We would click on Engines and Failures and say an engine fire number 1, and you've got a drop down box here, so you could put fail at an exact speed, so you could put 80 knots or something like that on your takeoff run, and you get an engine fire, engine warning, and then you'd have to abort the flight and carry out the proper procedures. But there's something here for and then you just cancel that. But there's something here for say systems, bird strikes, all sorts of problems there. Engine, wings, navigation aids, failures. So this would be something perhaps would be a good way of testing our understanding of systems and procedures. This is something I've used quite a lot. Toggle the replay mode. If you click on that, certainly I've used it for when I've done landings to see how good my landings are from different views. You click on that and then you can go back a certain amount of time, and it gives the option of then clicking on different views. So just to give an example, and then we press play, and then we can go up to view and say click on a chase view. So here we are outside the aircraft. So this was coming in for a landing. You could view it from different angles and see how good you did. So I find that quite useful and a good training aid. You click on the box there to get rid of it and go back to your default view. Maps, and this is AI flies your aircraft. It's not something I've ever used, or controls your views. Keyboard shortcuts you might find useful for setting up a shortcut on your keyboard to set up certain things. Again, that's not something I've ever used myself. And again, I don't think there's anything else down there that we'll be using. Views, obviously, there's the default view where we are at the moment inside, but you can set up all different views externally. Again, quite useful for training. And there's things you can put sunglasses on and night vision goggles, but that's not something I've ever used. This is the developer section. I don't think I've ever used anything on there. Sometimes you get asked to reload the aircraft if you do an update or something. So this is the box you go to, and I think it pretty says this one here, reload the current aircraft. You might find that in the instructions sometime to, if you're doing something. It says we're in replay mode. Let's get rid of that. Plugins. Now again, this would be something I'm going to do a whole video on. Plugins are additional things that you can add to Explain 11. Some are free, some are donationware, some are you have to payware. But everything that we are going to be doing, I think you can do with freeware, donationware, and the payware ones are optional. But I'll be going through the ones that I recommend and showing you what they do in a later video, probably the one after next. This button here is for pause. If you need to go and get a cup of coffee or whatever, you can pause the game, so that's quite useful. This one here we've seen enough, and the next one is ATC. Again, that's something I've never used. I've used Pilot Edge, which is something, an external third-party thing. You get proper professional ATC, but the one that's included in the game I've never used, but that's where it is if you want to set it up, and you can file a flight plan. And I understand it, you get some sort of ATC talking to you, so you might want that. Have a go at that. This is maps. Again, I don't think I've ever used this. I always use charts, proper charts. Again, if you want to have a look at the maps or need to see where the maps are, that's where to do that. Now this is a screen we looked at when we first started, and we'll be looking at this again probably next week when I download the Zebo mod, and we'll be setting up some more buttons and switches for that particular aircraft. But having a look at this, we've got another range of settings. There's so many settings to look at. General, the only button on here I'm just going to show you is this one here, use experimental flight mode. Quite often when you download the Zebo mod, he asks that you put the game into experimental flight mode. So that's where that particular button is. Sound. This is a matter of preference. You can set that up with different sound levels for the different particular audio coming into the aircraft. Graphics we're going to look at in a minute. Network, I've never used this. I think this is something if you want to connect the game to your iPad, like ForeFlight or something like that, you can do. But that's not something I've ever used. But I think all the details are in the manual if you need to. Data output, this is quite useful. We're going to be looking at this in a minute to get the frame rate on our screen, but there's lots of data you can have displayed on your screen if you need to. Joystick we've done. Keyboards we're going to be doing next week. Okay, so I don't think we need to look at GPS hardware and virtual reality. We won't be using that at all. So that's a quick cursory look at all those settings. We'll look at some of them in a bit more depth when we actually come to use them. But for now I want to crack on with looking at the graphics. Okay, so let's have a look at setting up our graphics and trying to improve them. What we're aiming to do is try and get a frames per second rate of between 25 and 35 according to the manual. This is like the sweet spot. Anything less than 20 is completely unacceptable and would result in a choppy experience, and anything more than 50, really you're not making full use of the settings, and you could get a better quality. So we're trying to aiming between 25 and 35. So to be able to see what your frame rate is, we need to get that information displayed on the screen, and to do that you go on the little setting box up here, click on data output, which we've got here, and then click on this little box and then press done, and then you can see in the corner we've got some information. The one we're interested in is the one in the corner here, which shows getting a frame rate of about 90 frames per second. Obviously we've got nothing, it's not doing much at the moment, so that's why. So it suggests that we do a few settings here to put the system under a little bit of stress, and to give us a basic average setting that you'll be using in your game. It suggests that you go to somewhere that's got some buildings and some aircraft, and they suggest Seattle, which is KSEA. So we put that on, and we'll go to somewhere in the middle like this. Press confirm. We also want some clouds in the sky. We want the graphics card to draw some clouds, so we'll go to scattered like that, and obviously we want to see what's going on. So we'll take it to the middle of the day, and I'm just using a Cessna for this example, and we'll press start flight. So obviously graphics settings depend on two things. One, the specifications of your computer. So if you've got a good CPU and a good graphics card and plenty of RAM, then obviously you're going to be able to turn up your settings higher than someone who's got a lower spec computer. And it also depends on the sort of scenery that you're going to be looking at. If you're going over an area with lots of buildings, or there's lots of clouds, or there's rain, then obviously it's going to put the system under more stress. So that's the two areas that affect the quality and the frame rate, basically. So here we are, we're at Seattle. Look around, there's not much at the moment, and the reason for that is because I've got all the graphics settings turned right down to 0, which you can see here. Here we are, so everything turned down to 0, and that's the starting point the manual suggests that you begin at, and then work up slowly, systematically. This side of the screen apparently deals with stuff that your CPU will be doing, and this side deals with stuff that the GPU will be doing. So obviously if you've got a good CPU, then this should cope fairly well on a high setting, and vice versa. And if you obviously got a good CPU and a good GPU, then you can turn them both up. But it suggests that you start off on this side and do it in small steps. So we'll turn it up to low, and we'll draw some parked aircraft for better immersion, and we'll press done. Quite often between these different settings it has to restart, and so there's a bit of a gap while it does that. Okay, so we're back, and it's drawn a few things now. We've got some aircraft, although pretty dreadful quality, and a couple of buildings and some vehicles, and you can see it's now dropped to about 62 from what was about 70. So let's see if we can increase that a bit more. We've obviously got some capacity there, so let's increase that to medium, and we'll try again. Now it's suggesting that you get to a frame rate that you're happy with. So I think what I'm aiming for basically is something like 40, and then we'll move on to the other side, the GPU, and try and get something around 35-30 as a finishing point, somewhere in the middle of the sweet spot. But if we can get to about 40 on this side, then we'll move on. Okay, so now we've got, I can't see much difference really. Perhaps there's a few more buildings on. There's something moving over there, and there's some aircraft in the distance, and there's quite a bit of movement on the airfield. And we've now dropped to about 40, which is what I was aiming for. So I think now we'll move on to, and we've got some movement on the motorway behind there. So I think now move on to the and a little train going past, and I think we now move on to the graphics card side. So again, we'll do it in small steps. We'll move visual effects up to low, texture quality to low, and anti-aliasing, which is the thing that smooths out the edges. You'll notice jagged edges normally, but this smooths it out. But obviously it puts some pressure on your GPU. I'll put that on, and we draw some shadows. So that's the starting point, and we press done. So we were getting about 40 at the end of the last process. So you'll see what's happened now. I've got quite a good GPU on this, so perhaps I'm hoping it won't make much of a difference to start with. not putting it under too much pressure, but we'll see. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, we've dropped to about 37, 36, 37. So we dropped a few frames per second there on that. So perhaps there's a little bit of an increase in the quality. Not much that it's too obvious. If we zoom in, that's not too jagged, is it? That's a little bit of jaggedness on the shadow there, you can see. So let's continue. So we got a little bit of leeway still. Let's go up to, and we'll move that up to medium. I'll leave the anti-aliasing at 2. From previous experience, I'm happy with that. And we'll press done again. That's looking a little bit clearer, I think. And we've now dropped to about 33, 32. So there's a little bit left, I think. If we get down to about 30, I'll be happy with that. That aircraft improved. That's dreadful, isn't it? But perhaps it's because it's close. But I think it's a little bit sharper and the details improved. And I think the jaggedness there has improved a little bit, although we didn't change the anti-aliasing. Okay, so let's go one more step. I'm going to increase the visual effects to high, and you'll notice when you do that the anti-aliasing changes down to none. So if you want to involve that, then you have to add it again, and it changes its name to sort of 2 times to this different standard FX AA. Yeah, it just tells you what that is. So I think we'll leave it at that. So we've got textural quality, we've got the visual effects on high, textural quality is on medium, anti-aliasing on FX AA. We've got medium number of world objects and medium reflection detail on drawing parked aircraft, and we've got shadows. So let's see what that does. So here we are. So let's have a look. We're still getting about 30, 32, 34, which is what we're aiming for. There's a little bit more detail, I think, on that tree, just like a blob before. And well, I think the lines on this aircraft are sharpening up. So I think it is making a little bit of an improvement. And it's so the edge of the dashboard here is quite smooth, and the jaggedness of the shadow is much better. So I think that's pretty good. I think you want to leave yourself a little bit of leeway in case we've got rain or the cloud reduces, or you fly over an area with lots of detail, then you've got a little bit of leeway. So if you aim for something like that in the middle of the sweet spot, then I think you're going to be okay. So just to show what happens when you go to an area with which is perhaps less busy, let's go to a different place. Let's go to Prestwick, which we might be flying from a few times when we actually get to doing some flying. Let's go to put the right code in, that might help. Okay, Prestwick, and we'll go to the apron, that'll be fine. And we'll restart. So I think we're getting about 32 frames per second at Seattle, with all that movement around and buildings, parked aircraft, etc. Let's see what we get at Prestwick. So here we are, we're getting about 42, so about 10 frames more at Prestwick. So there's still some aircraft, but there's not much movement, and there's not so many buildings or other furniture around, but obviously the aircraft is exactly the same. So another thing that you can set up is the field of view. So if you move this in and out, you can see in the background the zooming in and out of your aircraft. I like this. I guess it's a preference thing really. I like about 80. That suits me. Obviously, if you want to be a bit closer, then you can move it in like that. Or if you would like to be a bit further away, then that's up to you. But 80 suits me, and I think that might affect your frame rate a little bit as well. But again, like all these things, really, it's just a matter of experimenting and see what suits your system and what suits you. Some people like better quality and slower frame rate, or some people like a high frame rate and lower quality. So it's a matter of preference a lot of the time. So we're going to stick with that, and I'm quite happy with that. So you can see the dials really clearly, and the outside looks pretty good. And we've got some clouds. It's drawing those pretty nicely, and all the parked aircraft and the distance. You can see it draws good visibility. What Explain does actually, if it is struggling, rather it's getting down to like 20 or something, your frame rate, it puts in fog to blank out areas that it hasn't got to draw then. So you'll notice if it's getting a bit foggy, certainly in the distance, it's probably because your frame rate is starting to struggle, and perhaps you should be thinking about adjusting your settings. But I think if you set it up at a pretty busy airport to start with a bit of cloud, and aim for about 35, then you should have a little bit of leeway to cover most eventualities. So that's it, I think, for the graphics, and that's it for this time, I think. So next time I want to download the Zibo 737 mod and set that up. So mainly the setting up on the control, adding some bits and pieces we didn't do like last time, like the toga, takeoff go around button, the autopilot and flaps, undercarriage, etc. And so then that takes us a little bit closer to doing some actual flying. So I hope to see you next time.